What if a chance encounter in a quiet park could change the course of 3 lives forever? Picture this. A powerful CEO, once untouchable in boardrooms worth billions, finds himself face to face with 2 fragile little girls hiding behind a fountain. Their voices tremble as they whisper, "Please, don't let her hurt us again." In that moment, his wealth, his titles, his influence, all of it fades, leaving only a man who remembers what it feels like to love and lose. What would you do if the world gave you one chance to protect innocence and rewrite destiny? This isn't just a story about survival. It's about the power of choosing to stay, to fight, and to believe in family even when it feels lost forever. Stay with us, because what comes next will move you deeply. Subscribe now to the Retold Stories. The boardroom was a cage of glass and steel, filled with men in tailored suits and polished shoes, all nodding in rhythm to a presentation about numbers so large they felt fictional. Benjamin Cross sat at the head of the table, but he was not listening. His gaze wandered past the screen, past the graphs, past the voice of his CFO who spoke with mechanical precision. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city pulsed with motion, but Benjamin's eyes rested on something quieter, something older. A sealed envelope lay in his palm, the corners frayed from years of being moved from drawer to drawer. The handwriting scrawled in purple crayon had faded, but the words still cut through time. "To Daddy, do not open until my birthday." For 5 years he had resisted breaking that seal. For 5 years it had been a silent companion in the bottom of his desk, waiting. That morning, however, the weight of the silence in the room pressed on him until his hands trembled. He tore the envelope open. Inside was a drawing, clumsy yet perfect. A little girl with curls bouncing as she swung high into a painted sky. The caption beneath the picture read, "Even when I am not with you, we are still swinging together." The smile on the child's face was wide, fearless, eternal. A breath caught in his chest, and the air in the boardroom suddenly became unlivable. Without speaking, Benjamin rose, placed the card gently in the inner pocket of his coat, and walked out. No one stopped him. They only watched as the man who commanded billions of dollars vanished down the corridor like a ghost. 40 minutes later, his polished shoes crunched against gravel in Lincoln Park, far from the skyscrapers and away from the ever-turning gears of finance. He sat on a weathered stone bench near a fountain that coughed tired streams of water into the autumn air. The wind stung his eyes, but it was not the cold that made them burn. It was then he noticed them. 2 small figures crouched near a lion statue, their movements nervous, their whispers barely audible. One girl was taller, perhaps 7 years old, her tangled hair falling over her face. The smaller one clutched a paper bag against her chest as though it were treasure. Their clothes were mismatched, their shoes absent or torn. When the taller girl finally approached him, her stance was defensive, her thin arms spread as if to guard the little one behind her. Her voice was soft but urgent. "Please, mister, do not let her find us." Benjamin blinked, startled. The smaller child stepped forward, perhaps 5 years old, her lips cracked, her skin pale against the chill. She raised her sleeve with hesitant hands, revealing a bruise that stretched dark and cruel across her arm. She whispered, "She hurts us when we cry." The sound of those words rooted him to the bench, his chest tight, his fists clenched. The world narrowed to that bruise, to that fragile voice. His mind returned unbidden to the memory of Maddie's laughter, and the unbearable thought of what it would mean if her joy had ever been stolen in such a way. The older girl quickly pulled her. "Sister back. We are sorry. We will go." Her small hand reached for the others, ready to vanish like shadows. But Benjamin's voice, rougher than he intended, stopped them. "Wait." He swallowed hard, kneeling slightly so his eyes met theirs. "You are not in trouble. Are you hungry?" Their hesitant nods were answer enough. Slowly, deliberately, he removed his heavy coat and draped it around the smaller girl's shoulders. She flinched, then relaxed into the warmth, her wide eyes searching his face for betrayal. The older one remained tense, protective, her chin raised in defiance. Benjamin lowered his tone. "You are smart to be careful. Strangers are not always safe. But I will not hurt you, I promise." He thought about the hollowness of promises, about how easily words are broken. Still, he spoke them because he needed to, because silence would have been worse. He gestured gently toward the sidewalk. There is a diner a few blocks away. Pancakes all day. Let us go there together. The girls exchanged a glance. The kind of silent conversation only siblings could share. A tiny nod from the younger one, and the decision was made. They walked side by side, Benjamin adjusting his pace to their small steps. He resisted asking their names at first, sensing the fragility of trust. As they reached the edge of the block, his eyes caught a figure across the street. A woman in a tan trench coat, her posture sharp, her gaze restless, scanning the park. The older girl froze, then darted behind him, clutching at his coat with desperate fingers. Her whisper was frantic. "It is her. Please, do not let her hurt us again." Benjamin's jaw tightened, grief hardening into something colder, sharper. He turned his back deliberately to shield them, his mind already shifting from questions to resolve. "She will not touch you again," he murmured. The bell above the diner door jingled as they stepped inside, the smell of coffee and bacon wrapping around them. Like a blanket, he guided them to a booth tucked in the back, away from the windows. The waitress, a woman with gentle eyes, noticed their bare feet, but asked no questions. She brought hot chocolate and pancakes, and the girls devoured them with silent urgency, as if afraid the food might disappear. Benjamin watched, torn between awe and heartbreak. A man who had once managed empires but now felt powerless before two children who had already endured more than he could imagine. When at last their hunger eased, he leaned forward. "What are your names?" The older girl's voice was steady, though soft. "I am Laya. This is Rosie." He nodded, repeating the names quietly, as though committing them to memory, to promise, to something binding. He told them his own name only after a pause. "I am Ben." Laya's eyes flickered toward the window. Her fear was not of imagination. She was expecting the woman to appear again. Benjamin's resolve deepened. He did not yet know what lay ahead, but he knew this: he could not walk away. That night, as the city's lights flickered against the windows of the diner, Benjamin realized something he had not felt in years. He was needed, and in the fragile trust of two little girls, he found a spark of purpose that no boardroom could ever offer. The pancakes had been devoured in silence, and the mugs of hot chocolate had long since cooled when Benjamin realized the girls were still too tense to be full. Their shoulders remained stiff. Their eyes darted toward the door each time the bell jingled. They were fed but not safe. Rosie pressed her lips to the rim of her cup, inhaling steam instead of drinking, as if warmth alone could shield her from the world. Laya sat with her arms still curved protectively around her sister, her small frame straining against a weight that was never meant for a child to carry. Benjamin leaned forward, his voice careful, gentle. "Who is she? The woman you are afraid of?" The hesitation in Laya's eyes was long enough to make him ache. Finally, she whispered, "Claire. She says she is our guardian." Rosie's little hand tightened on her sister's sleeve, as though the very name was a shadow that followed them. Laya added in a near whisper, "But she is not. She hurts us. She locks us in closets when we cry." Her words cracked like thin ice. Rosie buried her face against her sister's arm, trembling. Benjamin forced himself to stay calm, though the rage inside him rose like a storm. He thought of the sterile courtrooms he had witnessed over the years, men in power abusing the system with sharp smiles and signed papers. He had seen too many cases where children disappeared into files, forgotten by overworked judges, pushed back into the arms of their abusers. His chest tightened with the knowledge that these girls had already endured that nightmare. He lowered his voice. "Where is your mother?" Laya's answer came quickly, with conviction. "Naomi. She is our mom. She used to sing us to sleep. But Claire said she is gone. She said our mom did not want us anymore." Rosie's voice, faint and fragile, added, "She said it was our fault." "That we were too much." Benjamin's breath caught. He reached across the table, careful not to touch too soon, his hand resting near Laya's. "Listen to me," he said, his voice steady, though his heart pounded. "You are not too much. You were never too much, and your mother did not leave you." "None of this is your fault." Laya's eyes flickered with something almost invisible. Hope, doubt, the desperate wish to believe. For a brief moment, the fortress she had built cracked enough to let light through. His phone was in his hand before he realized it, his thumb hovering above the screen. The logical choice was simple. Call the police, call child services, report abuse. But then he saw again the bruise on Rosie's arm, the haunted look in Laya's eyes, the way both girls recoiled at the sound of Rose. Footsteps. He could see it play out in his mind, the police handing the girls back to Claire, with stamped papers and polite apologies. The system did not always protect. Sometimes it failed in the worst way. His thumb froze, then slid the phone back into his pocket. Not yet. Not this way. I think we need another plan, he murmured. Laya looked at him with suspicion. You are not calling anyone? I will, Benjamin replied, but not the police. Not yet. She narrowed her eyes. Why? He hesitated, then chose honesty. Because sometimes the people who are supposed to help do not. And sometimes they make it worse. Rosie, quiet until now, whispered. That is what happened last time. We tried to tell, but they sent us back to Claire. She laughed the whole way home. The sound of that confession hollowed him. Two children already knew the truth of betrayal by the very people sworn to protect them. It was almost too much to bear. That night, Benjamin led them to a small motel on the edge of the city, the kind of place that asked no questions if you paid in cash. Room 208 smelled faintly of bleach and stale air, but the heater worked and there were 2 beds. He laid out juice boxes, cereal bars, even 2 stuffed animals he had picked up on impulse when Rosie's eyes had lingered in the aisle of a store. The way she froze when she saw them, then reached for one as if afraid it would vanish, made his throat tighten. Laya climbed onto the bed, pulling her sister close, her small body coiled like a spring ready to snap. We will not be trouble, she said softly. We promise. Benjamin crouched to their level. I do not care about trouble, he whispered. I care about you being safe. When Rosie finally drifted to sleep with her thumb in her mouth and her sister's arm wrapped around her, Benjamin sat by the window, the glow of his laptop illuminating his face. He called in favors, combed through records, searched for Naomi Langston. What he found chilled him. Naomi had been placed in a psychiatric facility under a temporary guardianship order signed by Claire Monroe. Official documents listed her as having no known children. She had not just been silenced, she had been erased. The cruelty of it pressed on his chest until his fists curled. He knew the machinery of power, the way signatures could bury truth. But this was not about balance sheets or contracts. This was about a mother and her daughters. He turned at the soft sound of bare feet. Laya stood in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes too old for her small frame. If Mom is alive, she asked, her voice fragile but steady, why did she not come for us? Benjamin knelt, meeting her gaze. Because someone made sure she could not, he said. But she never stopped loving you, and I will help you find her. For the first time since meeting her, he saw her lip tremble, her guard falter. She nodded, then returned to her sister's side, pulling the blanket over both of them. Benjamin stayed awake long into the night, his determination sharp as steel. He had built empires, but none of it mattered now. What mattered were 2 little girls asleep in a motel room, and the mother who had been stolen from them. By morning, his decision was clear. He would not just protect them. He would find the truth, drag it out from under the weight of forged papers and cold institutions, and put these children back into the arms of the woman who had never abandoned them. The world had failed them, but he would not. Not this time. The drive to the psychiatric hospital felt like a descent into another world, a place where time had stalled and people were tucked away, forgotten. The GPS flickered as Benjamin turned off the highway onto a narrow gravel road lined with trees that seemed to lean inward, their branches heavy with silence. Laya and Rosie slept in the back seat, their heads pressed together, their small breaths fogging the floor. Cold window glass. Naomi was somewhere ahead of them, locked away, buried under lies and signatures. Benjamin's grip on the wheel tightened. He had made deals worth billions. He had stared down presidents and prime ministers, but he had never carried a burden as important as this one. The facility appeared like a shadow dragged from the earth, its concrete walls gray and unwelcoming, Inside, the halls were sterile, lined with the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. When he asked for Naomi, the nurse squinted at him with suspicion until he slid across a document carrying the weight of legal authority he had rushed to assemble overnight. After tense minutes, they relented, directing him to a room on the 3rd floor. His footsteps echoed as he walked, each step heavy with the knowledge that this woman's life had been stolen from her. Naomi Langston sat in a chair by the window, her gaze vacant, her body frail. Her hair fell loosely around her shoulders, tangled and dulled by neglect. At first, she did not move when he entered, as though she had been trained to expect disappointment. When he spoke her name softly, she turned her head, and for a moment her face shifted from blankness to disbelief. "Do I know you?" she asked, her voice broken, dry from silence. Benjamin crouched low so his eyes met hers. "No," he said gently. "But I know your daughters, Laya and Rosie." Her lips parted. Her hands trembled as though they were remembering something her mind had been forced to forget. "The girls," she whispered. He nodded. "They are safe. They have been looking for you." The wall that had been built around her cracked. Tears filled her eyes, spilling down her face, as though they had been waiting for permission to fall. She covered her mouth with shaking fingers. "I thought I dreamed them," she said. "I thought they were gone." Benjamin stayed close, his tone firm but kind. "They are alive, Naomi, and they never stopped loving you." She collapsed into sobs, the sound raw and heavy. He let her cry, sitting near her in silence, understanding that some wounds required space before they could be touched. When she could finally speak again, her words were drenched with guilt. "I let them down. I should have fought harder." He shook his head. "You were silenced, drugged, cut off. What happened to you was not your fault. But now you have a chance, and I will help you take it." With documents, affidavits, and relentless determination, Benjamin began the process of pulling Naomi out of the shadows. Within days, she stood on the steps of the facility with a small bag of belongings, her hand clutched tightly around a faded photograph of her girls. When she finally reunited with them in the lake house, the sound that filled the room was not gentle, but fierce. Rosie's shrill cry of "Mom." As she flung herself into Naomi's arms, Laya clinging with equal desperation. Naomi sank to the floor, her daughters pressed against her, tears streaming down her face as she whispered apologies and declarations of love in the same breath. Benjamin turned away, not out of distance, but reverence. This was their moment. A piece of life, stolen and then restored. Yet peace was fragile. Claire had not disappeared. She moved swiftly, her lawyers filing charges of kidnapping, defamation, interference with custody. Subpoenas arrived, heavy with threats. Benjamin had seen men like her before, polished and ruthless, convinced that money and connections could twist truth until it served them. He was not surprised, but he was ready. In the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. Naomi sat beside him, her back straight, her hands trembling only slightly in her lap. Claire entered with a smile that did not reach her eyes, her attorneys armed with accusations designed to bury Naomi beneath the weight of her past. They painted Naomi as unstable, unfit, a mother broken beyond repair. They painted Claire as a savior, the noble, caretaker who had provided food and shelter when no one else would. Their words were sharp, rehearsed, calculated. Naomi flinched at the mention of her illness, but Benjamin whispered, "They are scared. That is why they are attacking." When his turn came, he spoke not as a CEO, but as a witness. He told the court how he found two girls hiding in a park, how Rosie revealed a bruise too large for her tiny arm, how Laya whispered that they had been told their mother abandoned them. He presented medical reports, photographs, sworn statements, but most of all, he presented the undeniable truth in the form of two children whose eyes told a story more powerful than any lawyer could deny. Naomi then stood, her voice soft but steady. She spoke of her illness, of her exhaustion, of how Claire had promised to help before turning her kindness into captivity. She told the court how her letters had been returned unopened, how she was told her children were better off without her. And then she said the words that cut through the courtroom like glass. If I am broken, it is because someone tried to silence a mother's love. But I am still standing, because that love does not die. The silence that followed was heavier than any objection. Even the judge paused, her gavel still. When the verdict was finally spoken, it felt like sunlight pouring into a locked room. Custody of Laya and Rosie was returned to Naomi. Claire was ordered to stay away, her guardianship declared fraudulent, her lies exposed. Naomi sobbed openly, clutching Benjamin's hand in disbelief. The girls had not just been saved. They had been returned to the arms of the one person who had never stopped waiting for them. As they left the courthouse, Benjamin felt the weight shift inside him. He had walked into this battle for two strangers. He was leaving with a family. That night, in the quiet of the lake house, laughter filled the air as the girls decorated the living room with paper lanterns. Naomi hummed softly as she baked bread, her hands steady for the first time in years. Benjamin stood at the edge of the room, watching them, the corners of his eyes stinging. He had lost a daughter, but in helping two others find their way home, he had found a piece of himself again, and he knew, without question, that he would not let them face the world alone ever again. Sometimes, the most extraordinary stories are not about grand victories in boardrooms or empires built on power. They are about fragile voices whispering in the dark, begging not to be forgotten, and about someone who chooses to listen. Benjamin Cross was not searching for redemption the night he walked away from his empire. He was a man who had buried his heart with his daughter's smile. But fate does not always arrive in thunder. Sometimes it comes as two little girls, with bruises on their arms and fear in their eyes, standing in front of a stranger and asking for something as simple and as impossible as safety. In protecting Leia and Rosie, Benjamin rediscovered what it meant to fight for something real. He uncovered the lies of a system twisted by cruelty, found a mother silenced but unbroken, and walked into a courtroom not for profit, but for love. And when Naomi Langston stood with her daughters in her arms, trembling but whole, the world witnessed a victory no amount of wealth could ever buy. It was the triumph of truth over deception, of family over abandonment, of hope over despair. The journey did not erase the scars. Laya still flinched at sudden noises. Rosie still carried her stuffed bear-like armor. Naomi still carried nights of silence where she wondered if her children were lost forever. And Benjamin still carried the ghost of Maddie, the daughter he could not save. But healing is not about forgetting. It is about weaving the broken pieces into something stronger. Together, they built not perfection, but a home. A place where pancakes meant more than meals, where drawings spoke louder than court documents, and where love was chosen every day, even when it was hard. What began as a chance encounter in a park became the rebirth of a family. And perhaps that is the deepest truth of all, that sometimes we are given a second chance, not to erase our losses, but to honor them by loving again. Benjamin did not just rescue two children. They rescued him. They reminded him that grief is not the end of love. It is the proof that love was real, and the invitation to find it again. So when you think about this story, remember it is not only about what was lost. It is about what was found, courage, trust, and the unshakable bond of family. And if you believe that stories like this matter, that hope deserves to be told, then stay with us. Join this journey, because there are more voices waiting to be heard, more hearts waiting to be healed, more truths waiting to be retold. Subscribe now to the Retold Stories, and let us keep reminding the world that even in its darkest corners, love still wins.